When viewed in light of God's holiness, all sins are fundamentally the same. Whether it is anger or murder, white lies or adultery, every sin results in eternal condemnation. Each sin, regardless of its perceived severity, contradicts the nature and will of an infinite and eternal God, making it deserving of an infinite and eternal punishment. Thus, from this perspective, there is no sin that is worse than another. In this theological sense, no sin is worse than any other, because all sins inherently defy God's righteousness. Every sinner falls short of God's glory. However, when considering the earthly consequences of sins, distinctions can be made. Firstly, sins differ in their earthly repercussions. For example, while both lust and adultery are sinful, adultery typically results in more severe consequences than lustful thoughts. The repercussions of harboring lust in one's heart are not as immediate or impactful as those of committing the physical act of adultery. Similarly, the consequences of covetous thoughts are less severe than the act of theft. Although all sins are wrong, they do not all carry the same weight of penalty or consequence in this life. In this respect, some sins can be considered worse than others. The Bible also highlights sexual sin as having a distinct impact on the sinner. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 18 states, "Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body." This passage places sexual immorality in a unique category, indicating that it has a direct and profound effect on one's body. This suggests that sexual sins may be viewed as particularly damaging, at least in terms of their earthly consequences. Therefore, while sexual sin may not be the worst sin in a universal sense, it is clear that it carries particularly severe consequences in our earthly lives. While all sin is equal in its capacity to separate us from God and lead to eternal condemnation, there are distinctions in the severity of sins based on their earthly consequences. Sins such as sexual immorality are singled out in Scripture for their unique and particularly harmful effects on the individual. This dual perspective helps us understand why all sins are grievous in the eyes of God, yet some sins have more immediate and severe repercussions in our earthly experience. The pervasive and destructive nature of sexual sin. We must understand that these sins, pornography, fornication, and adultery, are not merely private matters. They are affronts to the holiness of God, and they carry devastating consequences. Let us examine these sins closely and understand their deep impacts on our lives and spiritual well-being. Pornography, the hidden plague. Firstly, let us examine the sin of pornography. In today's world, this sin has become alarmingly accessible. The statistics are staggering. Over 40 million Americans visit pornographic sites regularly, and the global pornography industry rakes in over $97 billion each year. This widespread consumption is not without consequences. It leads to addiction, which corrupts the mind, weakens the will, and erodes the soul. The destruction of lives. Pornography addiction changes the brain in ways similar to drug addiction, leading to decreased sensitivity to pleasure, increased tolerance requiring more extreme content, and withdrawal symptoms when one tries to quit. This addiction traps individuals in a cycle of sin, drawing them further away from God and His intended path for their lives. The mind becomes enslaved to images and fantasies, making it difficult to form healthy, loving relationships. For relationships, the impact of pornography can be devastating. Marriages crumble under the weight of unrealistic expectations and the objectification of one's spouse. Pornography use has been linked to decreased sexual satisfaction, increased infidelity, and a higher likelihood of divorce. It creates a false reality that no real-life relationship can match, leading to dissatisfaction and frustration. The rise of platforms like OnlyFans has exacerbated these issues. OnlyFans allows users to subscribe to creators who provide explicit content, often of themselves. This model has normalized the commodification of one's body and sexuality, making it seem acceptable, even lucrative, to engage in such activities. This shift has had severe societal implications, particularly for younger generations who see this as a viable career path. OnlyFans has contributed to the blurring of boundaries between personal and public, and the easy monetization of explicit content has led many into a lifestyle that is hard to escape. These platforms offer a unique space where creators can share various forms of media directly with their paying audience. This direct interaction allows some individuals to generate astonishing, life-altering amounts of money. For many, the financial rewards are unprecedented, transforming lives with earnings that can be mind-blowing. The financial success of some creators is undeniable. Stories of individuals earning thousands, even millions monthly, have become more common. This kind of money can lift people out of poverty, pay off debts, and provide a lifestyle that many only dream of. The transformative power of such earnings cannot be overstated. Yet, the allure of this money comes at a significant cost. Exposing oneself to the world in such an intimate manner can have profound personal and social implications. The very act of sharing one's body and private life for public consumption can lead to a multitude of issues. Once personal content is out on the internet, it is nearly impossible to retract. The digital footprint left behind can follow individuals throughout their lives. The scriptures caution against the love of money, warning that it is the root of all evil. This adage underscores the inherent danger in pursuing wealth above all else. Jesus himself posed a profound question: "What shall it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul?" This powerful query invites reflection on the true cost of such financial gain. Is it worth compromising one's soul for the sake of monetary success? Turning our attention to the consumers of this content, we see another dimension of the problem. The proliferation of unholy videos on these platforms has created a pervasive culture of consumption that can be equally damaging. Many individuals, particularly men and women who might have the potential to be great, find themselves trapped in a cycle of endless consumption. Instead of pursuing their passions, providing a better life for their families, or making meaningful contributions to the world, they waste countless hours watching these videos. This addiction to unholy content can lead to a significant decline in productivity, creativity, and overall life satisfaction. The potential for greatness is squandered as they remain stuck in a virtual world that offers no real fulfillment. Ultimately, the culture of consuming unholy videos creates a society where potential is wasted and lives are diminished. The men and women who could be leading, innovating, and inspiring others are instead caught in a cycle of addiction and despair. This pervasive issue calls for a collective awakening to the true cost of such consumption, urging individuals to reclaim their lives and focus on what truly matters. The path to fulfillment lies not in the endless pursuit of pleasure, but in the meaningful pursuit of purpose and spiritual well-being. From a spiritual perspective, pornography is a grave sin that separates individuals from God. It corrupts the purity of mind and heart that God desires for his people. Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 28, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Pornography fuels lust and draws people away from God's design for sexuality, leading to a deeper spiritual alienation. Next, let us turn our attention to the sin of fornication, sexual intercourse outside of marriage. In our society today, fornication is often celebrated and viewed as a norm. Yet it carries profound consequences. Physically, it increases the risk of diseases and unplanned pregnancies. Emotionally, it leads to feelings of emptiness, guilt, and depression. Without the commitment and security of marriage, individuals often experience turmoil, and a lack of fulfillment. Engaging in fornication often leads to a host of personal issues. The emotional aftermath of casual sexual encounters can leave individuals feeling used and unworthy. The bond that is meant to be reserved for the sanctity of marriage is broken, leading to a deeper emotional and spiritual void. This lack of commitment results in unstable relationships and a continuous search for something that fornication can never provide. The societal impact of fornication is equally troubling. It contributes to the breakdown of the family unit, which is the cornerstone of a stable and healthy society. High rates of fornication are correlated with increased rates of single-parent households. The weakening of the family structure has long-term repercussions, including higher crime rates, lower educational achievements, and greater social instability. Fornication also has serious spiritual consequences. It is a sin that directly contradicts God's command to keep sexual relations within the bounds of marriage. Hebrews 13:4 states, "Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral." Fornication defiles the sanctity of the marriage bed and separates individuals from God's blessings and presence. It places a barrier between us and the Lord, hindering our spiritual growth and our ability to fully experience His love and grace. Lastly, we must address the sin of adultery, engaging in sexual relations with someone other than one's spouse. This sin strikes at the very heart of trust and fidelity. It is explicitly condemned in the Ten Commandments. "You shall not commit adultery." Exodus 20:14. Despite this clear mandate, adultery remains a significant problem with far-reaching consequences. The personal and relational damage caused by adultery is immense. It breaks the sacred bond of marriage, leading to feelings of betrayal, hurt, and mistrust. The discovery of an affair often results in the end of the marriage, causing emotional trauma for both partners and any children involved. Adultery undermines the institution of marriage, which is foundational to a stable society. High rates of adultery contribute to the breakdown of families, leading to increased divorce rates and the accompanying social and economic challenges. Children from broken homes often suffer the most, facing emotional and developmental difficulties that can have lasting effects. From a spiritual standpoint, adultery is a grievous sin that deeply offends God. It violates the covenant of marriage, which reflects Christ's relationship with the church. In Malachi 2:14, God speaks of the importance of faithfulness in marriage. "The Lord is the witness between you and the wife of your youth. You have been unfaithful to her, though she is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant." Adultery disrupts this sacred covenant, leading to spiritual estrangement from God. It erodes the foundation of trust and love that God has established for the marital relationship. The prevalence and normalization of these sexual sins in modern society call for an urgent and sober response. We must recognize the severe consequences of pornography, fornication, and adultery. These sins not only harm individuals and relationships, but also weaken the moral fabric of society and separate us from God.